عسى حبك بيض الله قلبك بيض الله قلبك كن سموحا لخصمك تلقى خصمك أحبك بيض الله قلبك بيض الله قلبك واحتفل بالمودة إنما
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum. Welcome to another edition of the Sulaimaan Ravat show. Yes, it's Friday night, another week has lapsed. Whatever's happened this week has happened. May Allah Ta'ala accept the good, may He forgive the not so good, and may every week in our lives be better than the week that has passed. You know, many times we live life in such a fast-paced way. It's become such a rat race. It's no longer just, you know, that phrase, rat race. It's really a reality. And the reality of life is that it's become so stressful, so steeped in routine, so demanding in terms of our time, in terms of our energy, that it's not all that often, if ever, that we actually sit back and say, let me analyze, let me take a look at myself, let me try and understand what are my strong points, what are my weak points, where do I need to develop, how do I improve as me? You know, we're looking always at the circumstances around us, or we're looking at, you know, certain specific things beyond us. So the job or the family or the community or the boss or the employee or the clients or the country or the politicians. And we have an opinion with regards to that, and we do an assessment. But it's not all that often that we assess ourselves. And it's not all that often that we actually have a plan of action in terms of how to develop ourselves and how to become better at whatever we want to do, and how to get a greater quality of enjoyment and happiness, satisfaction and contentment from what we do. How strategic are we with regards to ourselves? We may be strategic in regards our business, in regards our career, in regards certain things, finances, but because of that rat race, you know, because of that routine, because of that hedonistic treadmill, as they refer to it these days, we don't take a break. Yeah, physically we may take a break. You take a holiday, you take a weekend, you know, play a sport, or you do something with your friends. But do you actually ponder, reflect, assess, strategize, plan, and then commit and manage it and monitor it when it comes to self-development? And I think this is something that is sorely lacking in our lives. Sometimes we don't make a distinction between a busy life and a productive life. You know, we do many things, but not everything that we're doing is purposeful. You know, a purposeful life is hinged on productivity, but when it comes to just being busy, that is not necessarily an indication that we are living a purposeful life and that we're getting the best out of this opportunity which Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala has given us. This is a topic that you know, I've been wanting to speak about for quite some time, and finally now we've come to the point where we are going to be discussing it, inshallah. So it's all about a new you, how to go about assessing yourself, how to go about planning and developing a strategy so that you can improve yourself, and then how thereafter do you manage and monitor it. Now, our guest in studio this evening is Brother Yusuf Dindar. He is a strategy consultant. His passion is self-development, and he's traveled the world and he's met with different people and he's interacted and he's lectured on this particular topic in various spheres when it comes to business, when it comes to civil society, etc. But this is his passion, this is his calling, and that is the reason why we have him in studio this evening. Brother Yusuf, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for having me over.
Is this something that you initially had as an aim and a goal, that this is the path that you wanted to embark on? Or was it something that kind of happened along the way?
No, not at all. It wasn't something that I intentionally aimed to do. I think as a child I was always curious. I would observe people and always try to find a deeper meaning with regards events that happen. So I sometimes just as a child would wonder that, why do I overanalyze and think about stuff? And you know, it used to kill me at the time. But I think it was rearing me to where I am right now. So interestingly, I was one night in bed and my wife throws a book at me. What became a very famous book, it's a little superficial. It's called The Secret. And you know, it's about the law of attraction, how you can get your mind to achieve whatever you want to achieve. a little superficial, right? I mean, it talks about how you can manifest a Ferrari if you want to. And so it made a lot of headway at the time I read it, and I was just intrigued about wanting to find the deeper meaning behind all of this here. And there were interesting characters in this book, and then I think there was a DVD that came with it as well. So I watched this and I made an intention. I said, inshallah, I get to meet these people, just from a perspective of wanting to understand how the mind works, this concept of the law of attraction. Also, how it coincides with our Islamic principles and ethos as well. And alhamdulillah, I was able to meet up with at least 90% of those practitioners. So I just went on a journey in discovering my true self. And so I'd work and do whatever I need to, and that investment I made in myself. Because I believe that the greatest asset is actually between our ears. You know, we all look at external assets, we want to buy physical assets. And what's between us, what's within us, if we can spend time in terms of introspecting, as you mentioned earlier, assessing and analyzing, understanding who we are, who we truly are, who we were put on this earth for, and what were we put on this earth for. Because I truly believe that each one of us, this 7 billion people on this planet, each one of us were put on this planet for a unique serving to humanity and expressing that gift that Allah has bestowed upon us.
Now, I just want to ask you this question, because sometimes when it comes to a topic like this, you have those who are somewhat skeptical, those who are somewhat cynical. They say, well, you know, this is just kind of a good talk or a flowery speech. What does it mean to discover your true self? There could be a skeptic out there saying, well, I know myself. This is who I am. This is where I come from. These are my positives. These are my weaknesses. I got a short temper, but at the same time, I got a great threshold to tolerate. These kind of, you know, basic things. What does it entail, discovering your true self? What do we mean?
Okay, so you see, when we operating with our minds, right? We are operating, I believe, about 10% is what they're saying, in terms of our true potential. So it's about our rearing. You know, each person has given a different background of how they lived their life. So that has a major impact. It could be somebody saying something to you when you were a child, your parents, how they brought you up. Some people didn't have parents, whatever it may be. That has a major influence. So we look at the world through our lenses, a unique lens, perspective. And the interesting and amazing thing about the way our bodies are, and because the greatest, our Creator, has made this body so amazing, that there may be something that is blocking you. You know, it could have been, as a child, a teacher told you you were not good enough. When you went up for that speech, and you at that moment, or the kids laughed at you. And emotionally, what you do is you block yourself from speaking. So you don't even realize that your whole life you had this fear of public speaking.
So one particular incident then made you close a particular door,
Yes.
which actually, if it was left open, you could have fulfilled a lot of potential through that avenue.
Exactly. So if you don't discuss, so you think when you do your SWOT analysis, as you said, you look at your strengths, you know, I know who I am. This is the surface speaking. In a lot of ways, it's the ego, which is a good thing, the ego as well, because it's a protection. If you didn't have the ego,
The ego tells you what you want to be,
what you want to
but
be,
not who you really are.
Exactly. And it gives you a protection, right? So what you could have done is, because of that incident, yes, you may have become an introvert, but nothing wrong with that, right?
Is it because, you mentioned an interesting word, that the ego gives you that protection. Is it because the ego doesn't want you to go to a place that is going to take you out of your comfort zone, where you're going to have to ask yourself certain difficult questions in order to get to the root of certain issues? Is that why it's more convenient for the ego to say, well, I know who I am, like you say, surface-like, very superficial, kind of, here's the 4 blocks of the SWOT analysis, and I've tick, and that's it?
In a lot of ways, that is true, right? Like I said, it's it's an armor that you put around. Imagine you're going to be, imagine you walking around with your naked self. When I say naked self, as in your, with all its...
What's and all?
Exactly. I mean, you'd be a broken person also, right? So it's there to protect you, right? Another example is a lot of these limiting beliefs. They could be in various forms. Somebody tells you, or you were living in an area where there was this affluent neighbor, and your parents tell you, so you're not, sort of more challenged at the time. So what happens is you told, rich people are not spiritual or are not good. Now, this, your subconscious takes this here and imprints it as a belief system. So now you go out and you wanting to be successful, right? And everyone wants to be more successful. Money is a key ingredient, but nothing happens. Because you're sabotaging yourself, and this is a limiting belief that sits there and is blocking you from this that you were supposed to be getting. Allah has got this blessing, so you block yourself from this blessing.
So rediscovering yourself in essence is about learning more about yourself, rather than, people thinking that, I'm going to have to reinvent everything and do everything different in my life. It's more about understanding why you do certain things and whether they be positive or be negative.
Yes, actually you've hit the nail on the head. The amazing thing about it, it's just one word. You don't have to I think people overcomplicate this thing. And I think that's where people get scared. It's just merely an awareness. If you putting yourself in front of a mirror and seeing spots in you that you perhaps didn't even know existed. And this is where working with certain people, that's why they say surround yourself with people that can impact you positively. Because there's certain practitioners, I think at the time, back in the day, you had those that were more enlightened, so you could go to them. Today in the world we live in, it's become a very materialistic life. So there's certain practitioners that are more enlightened, more trained in this type of aspects. So working with people like this here, you go in and you start seeing what are those limiting beliefs? What are my strengths? Why do I act the way I do in certain instances? Why is it that with certain people I'm a certain way? Because we all have this chameleon type of behavior.
What's the objective? The reason I ask this is that there are some people who will say, okay, read Sharma, read this one, read that one. Very good, sounds very nice, gives you a good feel. But it's almost like you walk away thinking that they are trying to tell you you can do anything that you want in life. Whereas the reality is, not everybody is cut out to be a billionaire. Not everyone is cut out to, climb to the top of Kilimanjaro. Not everyone is going to be the best in their field, right? Because, and Islamically also it ties up, because Allah has created a particular system of interdependence. Not everybody is going to be where they would aspire to be. So when we say self-development, when we say, right, okay, go through this process of becoming more aware of yourself, what's the ultimate goal? Because one would assume there are those who would think self-development must translate in the end to more money or a better career or success in a worldly sense.
Yeah, look, I think again that's a bit of a misnomer, and people market themselves in different ways. We also need to look through this industry because there's a lot of fly-by-nights. There's a lot of people that are jumping on the ship and trying to. It's what was I reading somewhere? It's something like a $20 billion industry.
Wow.
Right, annually, right? So you can just imagine. Right, so if I go out and I market myself, making you riches in 30 days, there's a lot of those things, or transforming your body in 20. There's all of that stuff going around. The truth of the matter is not everybody, but what you're doing is you're selling hope, and that's where there becomes this skepticism, as you were talking, or disillusionment, right, with the industry. No, what it actually is about. The truth of the matter is, when I started. When I looked at these guys, I felt I was here, and these guys were here, right? when I sat with them and I spent some intimate time with a lot of these guys, like I flew to places like Fiji and Hawaii and, spent like at the guy's house and only like an intimate group. And then I realized this is a normal human being, right? Just like you and me, right? He's got his own
Challenges.
issues, right? He's going through, a lot of them have their own personal problems, right? And I realized, no, it's again, but there is a courage. I'm talking of the true, authentic guys that going out. I take a guy like a Tony Robbins, right? He's one of the leaders in this thing, right? Tony Robbins, at the age of 13, was hammered by his mom. He was like beaten up, left home. At the age of 31, he does a conflict resolution between Gorbachev and Clinton, right? Now, he could have used that instance of being beaten up and abused
To develop a victim mentality.
victim. He didn't do that. So what you're doing is you're learning from people that what they're doing is they're getting into a state of mind. And I think that's what it's about. What I learned is we all have this greatness within us. And it's not about money. It's not about everyone being a billionaire. No. It's about getting in tune into who you are. Right? For myself, for example, I was able to, as a child, become a hafiz, right? Growing up in Ravat. So for me, it was being clear about that gift. That's why they say for hafiz it's easier because you've been given that gift already. So it's easier to find, if you nurture that gift and express that, then that is your calling. Right? Everything else comes around it.
So it's about not necessarily changing what you do, but doing what you do better and being better at what you do and tapping more into the potential that's there, that's not being utilized.
Exactly. And it can be anybody. That's why, even in Islam, we taught about that whether it's the king or the pauper, there was respect to both. Why would it have been that, no, the Prophet should have been speaking to, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam would have been speaking to the poor and say, no, but you need to be successful. No, it was that understanding that each are given their own path. This is something that I also challenge some of these guys about this concept of what is our taqdeer. Because there's this view that you can create whatever you want to. That is true. That is true that a lot of times we limit ourselves by also taking a cop-out with taqdeer. Right? You say, no, this is my fate. Right? Yes, you can create it, but also understanding that there is a path set out for you that is unique. That's why I said from the beginning, each one of us are unique. And it may be that I am the street sweeper, but I do it, and you've seen that. You've seen people do it with such passion and such joy, right? And they love doing what they're doing, right?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting point there that I had this discussion once with somebody and non-Muslim and about the same aspect of what we believe in taqdeer. So on the one hand, these, whether you call them lifestyle coaches or motivational speakers, or as you would refer to them, the merchants of hope, they would tell you, well, you can create your own future. You have the potential to go out and decide what you want to do and do it. On the other hand, we as Muslims know that everything is subject to the will of Allah. And the way I understand it is that, look, we actually have the best of both worlds. It's not that you have totally no choice and you just have to float in life waiting for things to play out on your behalf. On the other hand, you're not totally left to your own devices. That, you know what, whatever you can create, go and create. But then if it fails, it's totally your fault. And then you find it difficult to then stand up and come up onto your feet once again. So we believe that you go out there and you do the best in terms of your ability, you explore your potential to its maximum, but you know it's all subject to the will of Allah, and Allah knows best.
Yes.
So your intentions may be one thing, your efforts may be directed in a particular direction, but if Allah wants to, change the course of action, He knows best. So we kind of have the best of both worlds in that we do it, we go out there, we actively pursue, but we also have a fallback. If after making all the effort, Allah has willed otherwise, then we are content with that.
Yes, exactly. And I think you said it very well. And this was one of the things, and I said to you that I had all these questions that I didn't have answers for. And this is where I also made peace, because also through this journey, went Faj, and I met Moulana, who's the marhum now, Junaid Jamshed. Not
Yes.
Moulana, but Junaid Jamshed. And there he put me actually onto a a very, he was actually a Moulana from one of the villages in Pakistan.
Okay.
Who couldn't speak English, but he was translating. And he spoke about this. So it made a lot of peace and contentment in my mind around this whole concept of Taqdeer, right? I challenged one of these guys, and he's quite a famous guy on The Secret, and he was stumped. Because I mentioned, and I think I was starting to frustrate his lecture, you know what I mean? Because he was going on a certain mission, and I like asked him, and I think he, you know what I mean? It was a bit off-putting. So, and I think we're blessed with it. Because what you're also saying is, you see, this is where I say The Secret and stuff like that was a little fickle. Because it's like, okay, you just think it and it will be. So what happens is,
very unrealistic.
The truth of the matter is, I totally believe this, that if our mind and our body, emotionally, is in a state of bliss, in a state of contentment, of peace, yes, you will attract that abundance, that blessings, that barakah from Allah. If you, in that state energetically of angst, of fear, of anger, all the negative, you will attract more of that. That I truly believe in. And so then we have the power, we to choose every single moment. Where are you on that scale? Are you in that state? Now, it's not about constantly jumping around, being this
euphoric person.
Yeah, I mean, that's also
unrealistic,
right? It's about actually that state of neutrality. The state, yes, where whether it is, now what has happened to us, unfortunately, is that we've become so, again, maybe it's this world that we're living in, that you'd hear on your phone, you pick up something, and it's breaking news. Something happens, and then we go into this negative state, and then it's some positive news, and you go into this euphoria. So you oscillate between these things. Whereas we know we've given up our power to externalities, whatever they may be. Yeah. Instead of us finding that joy within and contentment, and that's when you attract all the blessings that Allah has bestowed upon us.
Yeah, I suppose in the end, happiness has got more to do with the state of mind than the external circumstances, and that's what you need to focus on. Anyway, it's time for a break. Our guest in studio this evening is Yusuf Dindar. He's a strategy consultant, and we're talking about self-development, about bettering yourself, a new you. Welcome back. So as I mentioned in my introduction to the program, we live in a world which is very topsy-turvy, very fast-paced. We, kind of chasing our shadows. We're always out of breath in the figurative sense, almost always. And we don't take out time, to assess ourselves, to rediscover who we are, what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, to become more aware, to learn more about ourselves so that we can optimize on the potential which Allah Ta'ala has given us, the opportunity which Allah has given us, so that we can utilize more of that natural talent which is there, but which is not being utilized. And that's why we're talking today about a new you, about self-development. And Yusuf Dindar is our guest in studio. His focus, his passion is self-development. Now, in the first segment, we spoke quite a bit about awareness and that being a starting point. We also addressed some of the issues, that may pop up in the minds of those who are skeptical. Now, moving on from that, okay, so awareness is the starting point. And then I suppose in anything in life, you have to diagnose, you have to become aware before you can chart the way forward. But when we talk about self-development, right, taking it out of the theoretical sense, in a more practical sense, what kind of journey does it entail? What are some of the steps when you say, okay, when a person has said, I want to look at myself, I want to become more aware, I want to develop myself better or further, what is the kind of few essential steps that they would have to take?
Okay, so in essence, I mean, by its very nature, self-development, it's an introspection, right? So you got to go deep within yourself to understand who you are. I think that's the essence of it. What's blocking you? What are your gifts that you need to nurture and express to humanity? Because we all have these gifts that we are meant to express to humanity in whatever form. So what are those? And that's not necessarily your profession, because somebody says, oh, I like kids, therefore I need to be a teacher. It's not necessarily that. It could be, I like kids, but I could help them in so many different ways. I could do something else. Maybe my passion is I just have a gift of making money, for example, and then through that I can be helping kids. So, it's not as just one-dimensional as what people make it out to be. So it's about finding what is that purpose that you're in. Now, if you Google or go onto anything, you'll find tons and tons of information out there, and practitioners that are out there, right, that can help you. I truly believe that it is important to work with somebody, right, because they act as mirrors for yourself, right? So it is important to work with somebody, there's no doubt about it. They're people that understand the tools and techniques. These days, there are some amazing tools that are available, right? Just to be able, for example, we spoke about limiting beliefs. So if you identify a limiting belief, that being that maybe you see money as a negative, for example, there are ways that you can reverse that. So there's a thing called emotional freedom technique, EFT, right? It sounds woo-hoo, right? It looks woo-hoo if you go and do a Google search, right? You tap in on nodal points, but these are like in acupuncture. There's also these points, but if you work with somebody that understands this, you can actually, within a space of 10 minutes, 15 minutes, they can test you, muscle test you, and see that when it comes to that, you are in a negative state, and immediately after doing EFT, you're in a positive state. Now, I personally experienced it, so I'm not just saying this because, it is something that I watched, and I was just like, I was in that space of wanting to be, I was inquisitive, right? So I just wanted to do it. But I've experienced these things. So EFT is one, there's a whole lot of other techniques. But if I can say something very practical, one of the most simplest tools to get into a state of bliss, because it's all about energy, right?
Yeah.
It's all about, as we spoke about earlier, it's about getting yourself in that state, in that positive state, because when you're in that positive state, you're able to attract positivity. And I think this is inherent in our Islamic teachings, is gratitude, is making shukr for what you have. I started this about 10 years ago, where I'd write down every morning 10 things, just 10 things that you're grateful for. It could be repeated every day, but just get up in the morning and saying, grateful for being able to brush my teeth, or being able to walk, or being able to see a beautiful sunrise, whatever it may be. Just writing, or grateful for my family, my home, my car, country that allows me to practice my religion, whatever it may be. You just write down the 10 things that you're most grateful for. You will find that immediately you get into the state of bliss. Because it's all about, why are you doing this? You're doing this personal introspection, self-development. The ultimate objective is to get into the state of bliss, into the state of contentment. Because let's be honest, we are bombarded. I read something interesting. They said only 30 years ago, a woman living wherever she lived compared herself to 8 people around her on her street. Today, she compares herself, or man or a woman, compares themselves to millions of people around because of social media. At the tip of our hands is everyone around the world, and all this bombardment of stuff. Now, how do you allow yourself to stay in the state of contentment with all of these things happening? Before, it used to be just television. Now it's
because you're always now seeing something that you don't have, and you think that your happiness now relates to that which you don't have,
yes,
rather than focusing on that which you do have. So, like you say, previously, if it was 8 people around you, okay, he's got a better car, she's got a better house. But here it's like, even if I've got better than everybody in my town, let alone my street, there's someone in the next town or someone in the next country who's got something that I don't have. And I think little do we realize that there's no human on earth who will have everything that they want. because that's reserved for Jannah. So it's about focusing more on what you do have and considering yourself very lucky and very fortunate, and at the same time adopting that attitude of gratitude rather than focusing all the time on the many things that others have which you don't have and then feeling discontent.
Yes, you said something very importantly. You said that focus on what you do have. This is the key to having more. The more we all, one of the elements, we spoke about gratitude, is also goal setting, right? It's important to write down because that gives you hope.
Intentionality,
Intentionality. But also understand, and this happened to me a lot, is that I learned all of these things and understood who I was, and now I wrote my goals. So I specifically wrote my goals, but now I'm like pushing to achieve those goals, right? So I'm focusing on what I don't have. And that puts you, so it becomes counterproductive. The objective here is to stay in the state of bliss. You're frustrating yourself because you feel in a lack. I don't have, so I'm driving a small car, but I want a fancier car. Because this is my goal that I'm writing. But now it's not happening. So you get into that angst, and then you ask yourself, but why am I not achieving? Because you put yourself in the stressful mode by wanting to achieve. So
that's a key point that you make, and I want to ask a question at that particular juncture. As much as we say it's important to have goals, otherwise you just float in life and you become satisfied with mediocrity, and you get caught up in a routine. But it's also important than what you're saying. You must know what goals to set yourself. It mustn't be that, okay, I've got a Mercedes, he's got a Ferrari, so that's it, Ferrari. I've got a 3-bedroom house, he's got something in an estate, so that's my next goal, and it'll actually put you in a state where you're worse off.
Exactly. That's also very important. The type of goals that you set in yourself. Are you setting your goals based on your neighbor? Or are you setting those goals that are truly your own? The worst thing in the world is to come to the end of your life and realize you were climbing up the wrong ladder. Right? That's sad. And most people are doing that because, again, it comes back to understanding what is true to you. It may not be. Maybe you don't even have to drive a car. Maybe what was meant for you was to fly on your own personal jet. So you aiming for the Ferrari when you're supposed to have had the jet. So this is a freaky example, but point that I'm making is that it's about getting in tune with and being comfortable. See, this is the other thing. The other thing is, it took me a long while. All this that I'm saying is my own personal experiences. Is we are not comfortable in our own skin. So one of the objectives of this personal development or self-development is truly getting to a point where you actually don't give a damn about anybody's view on you. You are comfortable with who you are. You know what is right and what is wrong. You know this. Yes, you take in constructive criticism, but the point is when you get affected by people.
You're running your own race.
Yes. Yes.
So I suppose in a sense, if I can put it maybe in somewhat of a simplistic way, you got to understand what the broad parameters of why you've been created, what Allah wants from you, and obviously then you exist within those parameters, and then you can have your own parameters within the broader parameters of what is permissible and what is within what constitutes the pleasure of your maker, and then decide for yourself who you are, what are your strengths, what are your inclinations, what are your likes and dislikes, and chart your own path rather than wanting to live by everybody else's standards and benchmarks and run a race that is more suited to others and others are more comfortable with.
Yes, and that's when you don't have then these issues. I learned this from my kids, now that they're teenagers, this concept of FOMO. And I was like, what is FOMO? Fear of missing out.
Yeah.
Right? They use all these acronyms. But fear of missing out and today FOMO has become such a big thing, again, coming back to our phones, because you'll be sitting and you'll be watching somebody on a holiday on social media, and you'd be like, I should have been there, or why am I not there? And then again, what happens is it puts you in that state of angst, into anxiety, into sadness. Why was I not there? Why am I, I should have, and so you start beating yourself up, and it becomes self-perpetuating, because in the negative rut, you attract more negativity, and
So you're sitting on a beach in Durban, and you see a picture of somebody sitting somewhere in an exotic island, and then only when you get there you realize there's no halal food there and there's hardly anybody, you know you were better off at the beach in there.
Exactly.
I want to ask one question. You know, when you met these people on these journeys of yours, to what extent do they take spirituality into account? And obviously, in theory, a lot of what they say is in alignment with Islamic principles. There's no contradiction. But do they, even if they're not Muslims, do they look at spiritual aspects? Like, for example, we would say, "Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub." It is with the remembrance of Allah, not only verbal remembrance, but all those acts that constitute remembrance of Allah that brings contentment to your heart. We believe that the closest you are to your Maker is in sajda. The scientists today will tell you all about the energy and how when you bring your head closest to the ground, you kind of reconnect with your original kind of source, which is soil, all of those kind of things. But did you, as a Muslim, knowing these fundamentals of our faith, that, you know, it is taqwa and consciousness of Allah and compliance to the commands of Allah that brings you true happiness, because a disobedient slave of Allah will never be able to discover bliss and serenity in the way that they could, you know, I mean, to its maximum optimal level. Do they bring in these spiritual angles? Do they consider this?
Yeah, so if you're talking of the, I mean, each person is different and all have a different mode of training. But if you take in the guys that have been in operating in this business for a long time, talking 40, 50 years, there's a strong element of spirituality. I mean, obviously, it's a spirituality of understanding from a different perspective. A lot of them, interestingly, lean toward Oriental philosophies and, interestingly, Islamic principles. They may not say that openly, because you know this concept of universe, right? So they won't use the term God or Allah. So they say universe because they're obviously attracting people from all around the world with different faiths and so on. So, but what is that? That's actually a referral to the one.
Being, yeah.
All right. So there's a strong emphasis on spirituality. I mean, I felt it myself. I'll give an example. I mean, when I went on one of the trips, and one of my challenges was to pray more regularly. All right. Now we know it's prescribed. 5 times is when we need to pray. So I'm on this journey, and this guy is going on about the different practices, and we're talking about meditation. So he says, you should be doing these things. So like there's certain practice of meditation, and then after that, writing your goals and your gratitude journal, whatever. You should do it at least 5 times a day. I sat there and I'm saying, I am looking for something, right, somewhere. It's actually like a penny drop for me. And I was like, but I have it right at home. I
was taught when I was a kid.
It's with me.
Yeah.
I'm searching, but it's here. But so also in that searching, it brings you home.
It helps you to reconnect.
It brings you to your
It develops a greater appreciation for those fundamentals and the tenets of our faith.
Exactly. There's now this major thing that's happened. All of them are using a different terminology. Some call it the 5 a.m. club. Some call it the morning thing. And then there's a thing where, because at that time, it's proven scientifically that the air is at its purest form. And they're talking just immediately. So there's like practices. Some guys talk about, 20 minutes of prayer, meditation, 20 minutes of exercise, and then 20 minutes of like reading. So 5 a.m. club, we have it.
Fajr Salah,
right? And I mean, they've even quoted, one of them quoted Azim Jamal. And Azim Jamal was the guy who actually brought this out. He doesn't do as much marketing as everyone else, but he's actually very well respected. And Azim Jamal, he obviously as a Muslim, brought this out to the world.
Yeah, this aspect of Salah, I read it once somewhere, and I do something similar. Obviously as an alim, I'm a bit in a better position to juxtapose, so I can watch a Sharma clip, or I can read a particular book, and I can pick up on the Islamic angles. But they were talking about the stabilizing factors that you need in your life. There must be this kind of routine. There must be certain things which create a routine in your life, so that when you're out there in the topsy-turvy world, it brings you in, it stabilizes you, re-energizes you, creates some equilibrium and pushes you back out. And Salah kind of fits neatly, perfectly in with that, because when they talk about 5 a.m. club and all successful people rise early, that's your Fajr Salah. Your Dhuhr Salah, just as you're starting to tire, it pulls you in. Asr Salah revitalizes you just before that last leg of the working day.
Yes.
And Maghrib starts the wind down process and you close off again, connecting with Allah with your Isha Salah. And those are the stabilizing pivots, or the stabilizing pillars in your 24-hour routine. So while the world will go gaga for yoga, we'll say Salah gives us much more than that.
Yes, of course. I mean, of course. I mean, when you're doing the practice of salah, that movements is exercise in its form. It's actually creating the juices flowing. Again, what is it doing? Putting you in that state, right? I mean, when you anybody that experienced a beautiful salah, when you come out, Maghrib, you'll come out of there and you're just feeling re-energized. Before that, making the wudu, that points that you're touching, in the wudu is re-energizing you. All of it, the one thing I've learned is all of it is about putting you in that state where you can attract this barakah from Allah. That is what it's all about. And okay, it is the way it was. I mean, maybe it is that others had to go and understand it from a science perspective. It's not like I don't believe it isn't within our realms as well. But, maybe whatever it is, maybe it was lost in some way in history and whatever that, our imams and so on are maybe not bringing that enough. And maybe there's an awakening now in terms of doing so. I mean, this conversation that we're having. But the point is that it's not, you see, there's again a misnomer that these things are un-Islamic. The point that you asked me earlier, it actually links very strong. And then when I came back, I started understanding, are there people out there that are speaking this from an Islamic perspective? And I've found books as well that talk of the same principles, but backed up with hadith and Quranic verses that support it and so on. So it is very much in sync.
All right, it's time for another break. We're talking about self-development, how to improve yourself, how to better understand yourself. And Yusuf Dindar is our guest in studio this evening. That's his focus and passion in life. When we come back, we continue. Welcome back. So in this fast-paced world, we don't take our time to introspect, to assess ourselves, to see how we can improve, how we can develop as human beings. And that's why we're discussing this aspect of self-development this evening with Yusuf Dindar. In the first two segments, we went more to the roots of it, to some of the basic concepts pertaining to self-development. It's a bit theoretical, sure, but now in this last segment, we're going to look at some of the practical aspects. So, Yusuf, in the next 5 minutes or so that we have, what are some of the practicalities? So maybe I can ask you this question. If I can ask you, what are the 3 or the 5 most prominent habits of successful people that we can perhaps look at and say, right, okay, in terms of self-development, maybe I need to evaluate myself against these things. Would it be, for example, time management as one?
Yes, so you spoke about it. Structure is important in your life, right? And we have it through our prayer times. If we can work ourselves around those prayer times, you're actually going to see much more productivity in your life. You're also going to get just the prayer itself puts you in that state of bliss, and you come out of there being more productive.
Yeah.
And there's the reason, in the morning you can, after Fajr, it's very important to spend time. Spend time, they say don't go and sleep, you spend time and you look at the most successful people, are actually spending that quality time, planning their day. This is something that's very important. It's your intention. What you put out for the day is what you're going to get out of the day. So in the morning you're going to pray, obviously, you're going to do your salah. After that, it's also important to get yourself into your body moving. So, even if it means 20 minutes of just running or skipping or whatever, just to get those endorphins going, those are the happy hormones. It is very important, either going to the gym. If you can't go to the gym, just do it in your area, just take a walk if needs be or whatever, it's very, whatever suits you, if you've got a pool, you can swim or whatever it may be, but get the body moving. That is very, very important. So you put yourself in that state and then write down or just think of intently what your day is going to be. What are the things that you want to achieve every day? If you're going to achieve 5 things, if you just put 5 things for the day that you want to achieve, at the end of the day, even if you forget about the weekends, you're going to relax. For 25 new things you would have ticked off in that week that you would have achieved, which you wouldn't have achieved previously. So, and there's another amazing thing that this is your intent for the day. at the end of the day, another thing also, as I said, get into the habit of when you're writing, just it takes you 2 minutes just to write down the 10 things that you're most grateful for. Or if you don't want to write, there's a beauty in writing. Because there's something when you write it down, almost it's like gets earthed, you know, that this is what it is. But if you can't, or whatever it may be, then you, after your salah, when you pray and making dua, just thank Allah for everything that you're grateful for. You know, He has given you all this that you have, whatever it may be. That is so important, so important, because again, it puts you in that state of bliss, and then you get more in your life. In the evenings, do the same. Just be grateful for your day. Also assess what have you done in the day. You might have had those 5 things, but there's certain things that blocked you from achieving. That's reality. You're not going to achieve all 5 things every day. There's many things that happen. The other thing is, in this whole process, don't beat yourself up. It's not attaining of perfection. There's no such thing. We are perfect the way we are, with our good and our bad. That's just how Allah made us. He made us weak beings, right? We know we're going to have our Achilles heels, and it's about working on those things. So if you didn't, so be it. Don't kill yourself. Don't beat yourself up. Look at it. How can I improve? Even play a role play in your head. If I had to do something differently today,
Power visualization.
how would I have done it differently? You'll see the next day, the mind starts working. You start getting that subconscious mind working in a different way. Right? So these are some of the practical things on a daily basis that we can do. As I said, exercise is very important. Also, it's important, one of the things to get us also in that state of bliss is the food we're eating. There's no doubt about that. Our world that we live in is fast-paced. We don't eat regularly. And when we eat too fast. And this is one of the big things, right? So it is important what we're putting in. The reality is our food is of not the quality that it was 30, 40 years ago. I mean, that's proven fact. Right? It's just all processed stuff and whatever. So we can't obviously all go to organic and so on. But be conscious about what you're eating. You know, eat slowly. Just also slow your mind. When you, I mean, a simple thing. I speak to a lot of people, and they're like, I'm praying, but I'm in salah, and my mind is working
too fast.
You know, the other thing is, the more you focus on something negative, the more it persists. So if you're telling yourself, I'm going to pray and I'm not going to let my mind wander, it's going to happen. So what you do is allow yourself, if those thoughts come through, let it be. But when you're reading the Arabic, let that guide you. So the thoughts will come and it will almost block it from coming through. But slow down everything. You know, I think what we've tended to do is we constantly analyzing and thinking and overthinking. It's also come to a point where we overanalyze these things. So it's about slowing down, slowing the mind, and all prayer and, our salahs, dua, reading Quran is such a beautiful, reading Quran loudly lifts you emotionally, energetically, and puts you in that state of bliss. Just the Arabic reading. And that is a gift that you can just be, expressing.
This is a fascinating discussion, and hopefully one that we can continue some other time, inshallah. But just before you go, I recently attended a workshop, a very extensive one on leadership, and they were saying something, and I don't know if you would agree with this, and we could perhaps even prescribe it to our viewers, about taking out a stipulated period of time in your daily routine. That practitioner, if you like, was talking about taking out 60 minutes a day for self-development. And that's where you look at your goals, that's where you reflect on the day that passed, the day that is to come. But also, and he linked it to a verse of the Quran very interestingly. The Quran repeatedly tells us, will you not reflect? Will you not ponder? And I think the point he was making is, you need to start taking out time every day where you analyze, you assess, you become more aware, and you work on self-development. You do those things that are going to improve you as you.
Yes, definitely. I mean, this thing that we spoke about in that morning routine of that writing down your goals, and that's part of that. The evening, reflecting on your day, that's already whatever it may be, 45 minutes. I think this concept of whether it is 60, remember each person's going through their own routine, right? Some people work differently and whatever, their work times. So don't be so hard up on the actual time, but
Just do
Take
it.
time away to do those things. And it may not be in the morning, in the evening, maybe sometimes you can do it in the day. And another thing is, try and stay away from getting caught up in mundane stuff that you can waste your time on. You know, we're all surrounded by technology. If you get onto social media, rather be following those that are providing positive messages. You have YouTube. Instead of watching a silly show on television or the news unnecessarily, I mean, you may pick up watching. Go and listen to something that's motivating. Or, you know, there's such amazing wealth of knowledge that's available Islamically. Different scholars around the world at our fingertips on YouTube and so on. You know, you can listen to an hour of that. That in itself is about learning and about self-development. Yeah.
Yusuf, unfortunately, we're out of time, but Jazakumullah for participating and for availing yourself. And we'll talk again in the future, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Well, that brings us to the end of this program. Until next week, inshallah. Remember us all in your du'as and work at it, inshallah. Take out the time daily and work on developing yourself. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
جميل المساعي وامنح الناس حبك بيض الله قلبك بيض الله قلبك كن سموحا لخصمك تلقى خصمك أحبك بيض الله قلبك بيض الله قلبك واحتفل بالمودة وامنح الناس حبك بيض الله قلبك بيض الله قلبك